welcome to the Houston SPCA Pet Pawcast. I'm Dr. Virginia DeChant. Today we're going to be talking about horse rescue and horse adoptions. Our pet of the week is Keri, a Bay Arab mare. She's about 19 years old, we think. She came to us as through our cruelty investigations. When she came, she had a very large wound on her back, and she had sports medicine boots that have been left on. They should only be used for when she's ridden, and they've been left on for many days. So once we got her wounds all cleared up and got her fed and vaccinated and dewormed, she's doing great, and now she's ready for adoption.
Can you tell us about your background in equine veterinary care?
Sure. When I went to Ohio State for vet school, this was way back in '97, I knew I wanted to be a horse vet. Luckily at the time, Ohio State didn't have a separate track for people who want to do horses rather than small animals, so I had to learn everything. And then once I graduated from Ohio State, I moved to Central Virginia and started my dream job, working on horses all day, driving around to farms, and doing preventive care and emergency care, and that's how it all started.
What inspired you to work with rescued horses?
Basically, what happened is while I was in Virginia working as a private vet on horses, we had several large cruelty cases happen, one of which was a farm with over 100 horses. So they called all of the vets in the area and said, please help us with these horses. And I found a lot of fulfillment in doing that, and seeing the horses go from such a state of starvation and neglect back to happy and healthy and being ridden, it was really inspiring to me. So I knew that the next phase of my career was going to have to involve rescue horses.
Moving into the rescue and intake process, when a horse first arrives, what is the first thing you and your team do?
Well, the very first thing we do is we give the animal a very thorough check over. We check it from the tip of its nose to the tip of its tail. And some of the things we're looking for is how skinny are they? How much weight do they need to gain? Are their teeth okay? Are they showing any signs of infectious disease? Are there any wounds or injuries that this horse has had that haven't been cared for? And are they overall okay? Or do they really need immediate care?
What are some of the most common medical conditions you see in rescued horses?
Most of the time in rescued horses, it's not so much cases of abuse, it's just cases of neglect. Horses are expensive. So when people who have horses love them and they have enough money to take care of them, things are great. Then something happens and the person doesn't have the money to call the vet out anymore or to pay the farrier to trim their feet. And then usually when the money really runs out, that's when they can't afford to feed the horses anymore. So when horses come to us, they're typically pretty darn skinny. They haven't had their feet trimmed in a long time, and they have wounds or injuries that haven't been cared for, and their teeth haven't been cared for.
Can you describe the process of stabilizing an emaciated or injured horse?
So the very first thing that we do when we have an emaciated horse is we deworm them right away as soon as they come in, just in case parasites are part of the reason they're so skinny. And then we start off feeding them very small amounts of a really nutritious hay frequently. And then we don't want to overwhelm them. So we start off with that and give them a couple days to adjust to that. And then if they're doing well, that's when we start increasing the feed. It's amazing to me how often horses will come in and the very first thing they'll go to is a water bucket. And they'll just drink and drink and drink and drink and drink and drink. And then they start looking around for something to nibble.
What diagnostic tools or tests do you use to assess horses' condition?
So a lot of the tools that I use to look at a horse are these. I feel everything. That can give me a lot of information. I look at everything. I smell their breath, believe it or not, to see if I can smell any rotten teeth. Then I use my stethoscope to listen to their heart and lungs. I'll use a thermometer and take their temperature. If I see something that, like the horse is limping, I'll pick out their hooves with a hoof pick, and then I'll put a set of hoof testers on to see if I can find a sore spot in their foot.
How do you determine a horse's age when they arrive?
So, looking at a horse's teeth is pretty much the only way we have of determining how old they are. When they're very young, it's pretty easy because we can just count to see how many baby teeth they have and how many adult teeth they have, and we can get a pretty good idea of how old they are with that. But once all their adult teeth come in at 5, then it kind of becomes a guessing game. I can look at the grinding surface of their front teeth and see some anatomical differences that'll give me an age range. If I look at the back of their mouth where the cheek teeth are, where they grind up all the hay, I can see some changes back there that'll indicate whether they're middle-aged, elderly, or ancient, but I can't determine an exact number.
Are there any diseases or illnesses that are more common in rescued horses?
There are some diseases that I particularly look for in rescued horses. When they're really, really skinny, it really takes out their immune system. So they can get lice. Pretty much the only time I've seen lice is in rescue horses. The other conditions that we see very often is an infection of the soft tissues on the bottom of their feet. It's called thrush. It's basically the equivalent of athlete's foot for horses. It's from standing in really moist, nasty environments. And then sometimes if they have not had their skin cared for, like they haven't been groomed in forever, I'll see a lot of dermatitis on their back. We call that rain rot.
Moving into veterinary care and recovery, what does a typical recovery timeline for a rescued horse look like?
Most of the time, we're somewhere between a month to 3 months for a horse to recover. The maximum amount of weight gain a day is about 1 pound. So if they need 150 pounds, it's going to take 150 days. So we do have some cases where the horses get up to speed faster. But for the most part, by about 3 months, we kind of know where we're going to end up.
Would you say 150 pounds is the most common a rescued horse comes in underweight?
Yeah, it's usually anywhere from 100 to 300 pounds, but most of them are in that 150 range.
How do you create a nutrition plan for a malnourished horse?
The most important thing for me creating a nutrition plan for the horse is I've got to get in their mouth and see what kind of shape their teeth are in. It's not uncommon for us to get really old horses that have lost a lot of teeth, or the teeth that they have are so worn down that they can't actually grind anymore. And then those horses, we have special feeds that we can give them that are already chopped up hay so that they don't have to chew the hay, and they still get the nutrition from it.
What would you say is the biggest challenge in treating long-term neglect?
The biggest challenge in treating long-term neglect is the horses that have completely shut down emotionally. They've been in such traumatic, horrible conditions for so long that they just don't care about anything anymore. That can be really difficult to overcome. You can get their bodies healthy, but their brains, you can't fix it.
Can you share an example of a horse with a remarkable recovery story?
Oh, I have so many horses with remarkable recovery stories here. Some of my favorites are a horse that came in with a horrible, horrible wound on its leg. And we just kept treating it and treating it and treating it. And the healthier she got, the faster that wound healed. And by the time she was ready to go for adoption, you couldn't even tell which leg it was injured on. That made me feel really good.
Speaking of wounds, how do you manage pain in horses that have suffered injuries?
So we have a couple different options as far as pain control. Our most common one is the cheapest and easiest, which is called Bute. It comes in either a tablet or a powder that you scoop them onto their food. So that I use a lot. If a horse has an upset stomach though, the Bute can make that worse. So we have another drug that we use called Equiox, and that seems to be a little bit more soothing for the gut, and that helps decrease inflammation. Some of the other ways I address pain is making sure that they're getting turned out with the right group of horses. If they're a little sore and a little stiff, I'm not going to put them in with the youngsters who are going to play all rambunctious and crazy. I'm going to put them in with other horses that are pretty mellow. Some of the other things I use is we love joint supplements here. There's 100 different kinds of joint supplement, and I usually just take whatever we get donated, and it does seem to help those older horses to just have a little bit of stiffness, a little bit of achiness.
How do you determine when a horse is ready for adoption?
So when we assess a horse for adoptability, we'll basically put them through a couple of tests. We'll make sure that when we ask them to pick up their feet, they'll give them to us. We make sure that they'll stand for the farrier to trim the feet. We'll make sure that when they are tied, they don't pull back or freak out. We make sure that they know how to take a bath without getting too upset. We'll make sure that they can get on and off a trailer without having it be a big deal. And then if the horse is a riding horse, our barn staff will get on them and see what they know under saddle, and see whether they're safe for any rider, whether they're more for intermediate riders, or whether they need an advanced rider. And then once we know what they know, we put them on the website, and they're available for adoption.
How does neglect or trauma impact a horse's behavior?
A lot of the times being neglected, it makes a horse defensive. They're not very trusting of humans just because they haven't had anybody care for them in a while. And so a lot of what we do here at the Houston SPCA is just treat a horse gently, let it know that we're not anything to be scared of, and then basically teach the horse that if it decides to do what we ask it to do without any fuss, it goes much smoother. So some of the ways that we train horses like that is we'll put them in the round pen and take the halter off, and then we'll just ask them to move and say, I'd like you to move in that direction. I'd like you to move in that direction. I'd like you to stop. And as we ask the horse and he finally understands what we're asking, then he realizes, oh, this is not so bad. And then some of the other things that we do to help encourage horses to learn to trust us and to accept a rider again is we'll take things very slow and step by step. So instead of just forcing them to do it, we'll ask them to do it. We'll say, hey, I'd like to groom you. Do you mind standing here while I do it? And if they say no, we try again the next day. If they say yes, we try to make it a very positive experience. We scratch their itchy places. If they say, I don't want you to touch there, we listen and we say, okay, we won't touch there right now. And if we listen to the horse again and again, and we show the horse we understand what they're telling us, soon the horse gives us lots of green lights. And he says, yeah, I'll stand here while you groom me. Oh, you want my foot? Okay, I'll give you my foot. So it's a matter of taking it slow and doing lots of repetitions of it. But the main thing is letting that horse know that we're listening to the signals that they're giving us.
What should adopters know before bringing home a rescued horse?
Well, I really recommend that adopters have lots of resources before they bring a horse home. And I'm not just talking, buildings and fences and money and hay. It's the people. They need to have people in their life that when they run into something, they can talk it over with them. Especially somebody who's been there, done that, had 100 horses in their lifetime. That can be a really good resource for, hey, my usual way's not working. Is there another way I can do this? So the main resources I would recommend horsemen have is other horsemen.
Here at the SPCA, we have acquaintance areas for the dogs and the cats. How can a potential adopter get acquainted with the horse?
So when an adopter expresses interest in adopting a horse from us, we ask them to submit an application and give us a couple references, mainly the veterinarian they're going to use and the farrier they're going to use. If they want to adopt a horse that hasn't been trained, like because it's too young, we recommend that they also give us the name of their trainer. And we'll call those people and with the help of those people figure out which type of horse would be the best fit for that adopter. And then we'll look through the horses that we have available. We'll pick 3 or 4 that would maybe fit their needs. And then we have the adopters come to us either here at Houston SPCA in town or at the farm that we lease out in Hempstead. And we have them get to know the horses by getting on them and riding them, and then just, if they're not riding horses, just meeting them. And we'll see if there's that click.
What should potential adopters consider when choosing a horse?
So when choosing what horse is best for you as an adopter, a lot of it's going to depend on how much horse experience you have, what resources you have as far as other horsemen, facilities, money, and so how high maintenance a horse is depends on how high maintenance the owner is. So for first-time adopters, I recommend that they choose a horse that's really well-trained, very quiet. It might be a little bit on the older side. I would not recommend a young horse for a first-time horse owner. But once we find that right match of the horse that'll take care of you and you will take care of that horse, it's a perfect fit.
You described the feeling of seeing a horse go from severe neglect to thriving in a new home.
Oh, the feeling of seeing a horse go from the most horrible situation you can imagine to living a life full of love and care. I can't describe it. It really makes me feel like I just want to get up and do it again. Seeing our horses happy in a new home with new people, with their little girl, it keeps me motivated for that next case. And sometimes when we see something really bad, I pull up the memories of horses that have left here and found their right person, and it just makes me work all that harder to make sure that this horse gets that result.
What final advice would you give to anyone interested in equine rescue or adoption?
My advice to people who are interested in getting into rescue and adoption is it's easy to do too much too fast. So before I jump in both feet, I would try to do a little bit of small chase, a little bit of volunteering, or a little bit of helping out, because you don't know how much you can handle at first, and you may find that seeing horses in such dire conditions is too hard. And there have been times where it's hard for me, and I do this every day. So I would recommend, if you really want to get involved with it, start small and see how you handle it, and then go from there. I'm Dr. Virginia DeChant. Thanks again for visiting us in the Pet Pawcast, and I hope you're able to make it to our April 12th adoption event and open house. We'll be giving some riding demonstrations and showing off our horses.